Is AMD going to quit making GPUs because Nvidia's RTX 50 series is going to be so dominant? Well, a couple of things are kind of telling us that may be the case. Their gaming revenue is down by 50% as their recent earnings show, and big, vendors like MSI are now no longer making any AMD Radeon GPUs. They rather make GeForce GPUs. Do they know something that we don't know? Do they know that maybe RTX 50 series is going to be so dominant that AMD might as well is getting ready to drop out of the race? Well, let's talk about why that could be. There's some interesting things you may not know. And of course, remember to subscribe and smash that like button. Helps the channel grow and get more of GPU and PC part information out there. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. Is AMD about to quit making GPUs in general? Now, this isn't even any type of dramatic statement. There's some real stuff happening. Recently, we saw something from Hardware Unboxed that MSI didn't have any more Radeon GPUs in its lineup, and that seemed to be worldwide, and even in the US, it seems like everything is diminishing, and MSI even confirmed it. But aside from that, there's something else that you probably didn't know. Have you looked at AMD's recent quarterly earnings that just came out? Their gaming revenue is down almost 50%. That is a massive number. That is usually not a number that you want to see somewhere, even in a bad market. That's not something you really want to be part of, because that indicates that they're going the complete wrong direction. That's not only being in a bad PC, hardware market, but that's also people not choosing their hardware at all as compared to maybe Nvidia. So this is all going to mesh together to create a very not so great situation for gamers. Nvidia is going to continue to be dominant. Nvidia probably doesn't care that its gaming GPUs have sold less or if they don't sell nearly as many, because on the AI side, they're doing really well. Obviously, AMD is also participating in some of that AI uptick. Their server stuff, their CPUs and things like that are still doing pretty good, the data center side, but nowhere near Nvidia. They didn't enjoy that same flourish of their stock price and everything else like Nvidia did. Nvidia really is a bit singular in what's going on here. They're almost like a unicorn company. They're really rocketing it into outer space. So what does that mean for gaming products? First, let's talk about the gaming revenue dropping so drastically. Yes, people are buying less PC parts recently. It's just how it's been. There hasn't been too many exciting things happening. So anytime somebody goes to decide to buy a new GPU, most likely they're just going to go buy the Nvidia product. I guess it doesn't matter that, AMD has had some competitive GPUs like the 7800 XT, most definitely put some pressure on Nvidia around the 4070 side, but then Nvidia released the 4070 Super, which is still a little expensive, but it's 12 gigabytes of VRAM, at least matches some of AMD's offerings in that sort of, mid-range, and it's going to be considerably faster than the 4070. That one actually did get a pretty good uptick in performance, and especially with, Nvidia being in the news so much for AI and everything else, maybe gamers look at it and they're like, I want the winner for my GPU. Maybe that can happen as well. AMD has always been popular as the second choice, but only if that second choice meant that gamers are going to save a lot of money. GPUs like the 7900 XT were too expensive and they didn't really do that well, even if sometimes they performed better than something like a 4070 Ti. They were just too expensive for being an AMD product. So that shows you if gamers have a choice, either they're not going to buy anything or they may go towards the Nvidia side, and that's why AMD's side has been suffering. Now, if we look at what Hardware Unboxed posted about MSI basically getting out of the game, they just said they're going to focus on the GeForce GPUs, which are going to be a lot more lucrative for them. So, that kind of goes hand in hand with what we're seeing with, the GPUs not selling and AMD's gaming revenue going down. If they were selling GPUs, this definitely would not be happening. So that's going to be something that you have to think, who else is going to drop out of the AMD race? Obviously, EVGA no longer does GPUs with Nvidia, so it can be tough on that front as well. But if AMD partners are starting to drop out and MSI made so many less GPUs for AMD, AMD compared to Nvidia. I think they only had like 4 this generation. And of course, granted, they're not going to be the major partner for Radeon GPUs. You have Sapphire and PowerColor and even Asus that also produce GPUs, but certainly something to think about. And if it was that lucrative, they would have wanted to stay in. So that means that we're going to be left next generation with potentially only Nvidia really being the dominant force. We already had murmurs that AMD wanted to drop out of the competitive GPU space, so that's going to certainly be something interesting to keep an eye on. While RTX 50 series is going to be fine, it's probably going to perform well. If there's no competition, what about that price? Nobody complained that the 4090 was mediocre, but they did complain it was kind of expensive. Even though it has, class-leading performance, that's definitely an expensive GPU. Most of them are around $2,000 now. It's very hard to find a model that's the base MSRP of $1,599, which is already expensive. Remember the 1080 Ti before, all of these GPUs went up in price? That was $699. So that's what we used to have as a top-end GPU. Now you got to pay double or more than that because of all the prices going up. And if there's no competition from AMD and Intel, I think it's going to be a little bit bleak of a future if nobody else steps in. Nvidia is just going to charge whatever they want, and then inventory and everything like that may become an issue again. And obviously Nvidia makes so much money on the data center side that they can afford to have the gaming market go a little bit slower and not necessarily have to discount parts, so that way everything is sold more cheaply. So it's going to be interesting to see what AMD does next generation. They haven't released anything to compete with the super GPUs of Nvidia, and while the 7900 XTX is definitely a good product, 24 gigabytes of VRAM, it competes well with like the 4080, and you can often get it cheaper. Now that the 4080 is in fact cheaper because of the release of the 4080 Super, the 7900 XTX definitely has to come down in price even more. It's going to be the area where AMD really needs to focus, just much cheaper pricing. Anything else is going to be a little bit of a difficulty to compete against Nvidia, and as you can see, their gaming revenue is down, companies are dropping out, so this is definitely going to be a bit of a problem with RTX 50 series coming out. It's probably just going to dominate for next generation, which may not be so good for gamers' pockets. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.